Hi, this is Munson from Munson Music, and welcome to Munson Jam Tracks, where we're going to talk about a lot of things that don't necessarily relate to songs, but could be applied to just about any song. And we're going to start off with kind of some interval reviews, and what intervals are is distances on the guitar, so how far you're going from one note to another note. And we're going to use an A octave or baseball octave kind of scenario to kind of attach some notes to, and then that way you can kind of see like how you could take shapes and then kind of apply them. So we're talking about applications of octave shapes essentially. And so what we could do is be prejudiced and take an A note of all notes and basically go and find all those A notes on the guitar. So you have an A note on the low E string on the 5th fret, open A, 12th fret on the A, 7th fret on the D, 2nd fret on the G string, 10th fret on the B string, and then the high E on the 5th fret are all A notes. And if you're familiar with the octave shapes of how far you're moving from one note to another note, from A to A is the distance what we call an octave. Because if you went up 8 notes on your fingers, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then in music we start over on A. So that's your 8 notes is kind of working distances from one note to another note with the same name. And it's a cool shape that I call baseball octaves, actually, where you're talking about the low E string is home base, D string is first base, high E on the 5th is second base, and then the 3rd base is the G string on the 2nd fret, and then from there you go to the low E string again. And I've made a couple videos actually on octave shapes, so it's kind of working off of that idea. And then from there, then this is the baseball diamond, right? Kind of home base, first, second to third, third to home base. And then you could go from home to first base, or the D string A, and then put your first finger there and kind of go to the B string on the 10th fret. It's kind of another A or another octave shape. And then from there, then we could work that to the A string on the 12th fret. And then from the A string on the 12, I call that left field and right field, randomly the B string and the A string one. And then from there, we could go to the G on the 14th fret, which is just like the 2nd fret on the G string. And then from there, we could go back to the high E and the low E, and kind of be back in our diamond shape. So it's really essential to kind of for these exercises anyway to understand that octave shape scenario. So you may want to review that if you're not familiar with that. And the idea of taking shapes is our basic ruler is major scale. So like if we did an A major scale from the low E string, you'd have 5, 7, 9 on the low E string, 5, 7, 9 on the A string, and then 6, 7, 9 on the D string, 6, 7, 9 on the G string, and then 7, 9, 10 on the B string, and then 7, 9, 10 on the high E string. And you'd be playing A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A, and then an A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A, and then an A, B, C sharp, D. So I'm kind of using a stretch pattern for that. I know there's a lot of other patterns for that. I think this is the easiest one to remember. And basically, that's your sound of your do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, re, mi, fa. And the notes we're playing A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, D. And it can be a cool idea to kind of use those as landmarks. But we could also think about those as numbers, where A is number 1. And if we're going up the scale, we can think about it as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then you're back to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then you're back to 1, 2, 3, 4. So all the shapes we're going to be talking about actually on this particular channel and combinations of are all going to relate to that major scale scenario, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. And all the other notes are going to relate to those as flats, as adjustments of those notes. Occasionally we'll talk about sharps, I'm sure. But you basically have the A is 1. And so the 7th fret on the low E string, B, is a 2. But the 6th fret on the low E string would be a flat 2. So we got 1, flat 2, 2. And then if you went to the 8th fret on the low E string, that would be a flat 3. And then the C sharp note on the 9th fret is a regular 3. And then the A string on the 5th fret is a 4. And then if we go over 1 from there, that would be a flat 5. And then we got a 5 on the 7th fret, flat 6, and then a 6, and then a flat 7, and then a 1, and then or a 7, and then you're back to 1. So kind of thinking of chromatic scale, but in relationship to an A note. So 1, flat 2, 2, flat 3, 3, 4, flat 5, 5, flat 6, 6, flat 7, 7, 1 is kind of the idea. And you might want to kind of work that backwards too. That 1, 7, flat 7, 6, flat 6, 5, flat 5, 4, 3, flat 3, 2, flat 2, 1 is kind of an idea. So what you could do is you could take one little shape from that chromatic scale idea of the major scale as a ruler, or the chromatic scale as a ruler, and then you could kind of drill that shape so that you always know how far away that sound is under your fingers. So for instance, we could take the flat 2, kind of that half step idea of just A to B flat, going from 5th fret on the low E string to 6th fret on the low E string, and then take that idea and then try it from the other A notes. So you could try it from A to B flat there, or A1 to flat 2 is what you're thinking, or root to flat 2. And then you could go to the D string, root flat 2, and then you could go to the high E, and then you have root flat 2, and then you could go to the G, root flat 2, and then you could go to the low E, root flat 2, and then kind of work it around baseball octaves as kind of that idea. And then from there, then you can kind of go to the next octave, kind of working left field, so then you'd be on the B string, 10 and 11 for a root and a flat 2. And then from there, you can go to the A on the 12th fret, and kind of work your root and your flat 2. And then the G string, and then back to the low E string, D string, high E. So that might be kind of a cool thing to play around with, just to see that shape on one string. If I go one fret away, that's always a root and a flat 2. Now another flat 2 shape you may want to look at is on the next string. Like if you played low E on the 5th fret, and you went to the A string on the 1st fret, that would be another flat 2 shape, and that shape is kind of nasty. And there are a couple places actually where we're going to end up kind of adjusting our shapes. Actually, our B string is the evil guy, and he shifts things one fret to the right. Of course, this is the evil interval too. That root flat 2 is kind of jaws, right? So you might want to kind of play around with that. But that shape of the low E string on the 5th fret to the A string on the 1st fret, we can move to other places too. So you could take the A on the D string and then work that to the G string on the 3rd fret for a flat 2. And we can't really do that shape from the high E string. We're kind of stuck, right? And on the G string, we don't really have enough frets. But if we went to the other octaves, if we go to the D string, and then we got the A string kind of working the B string on the 10 to the high E on the 6, that's another flat 2 shape. That's nasty. And then if we go to the A string, we could go to the D string on the 8th fret, that'd be another flat 2 shape. Or if we went to the A string on the 12th and went to the B string on the 11th fret, that would be another flat 2 shape. And that's where things changed actually, as the B string got shifted over one fret from what you might have thought the shape would look like. And then from there we could go back to the low E string, and then we'd have the D string kind of working that same shape. So that might be kind of a cool thing to kind of try. Now you can also see the shapes over the octave shape. So you can do low E string to the D string on the 7th or 8th fret. You can kind of work it off of that, kind of looking at where your octave is and going over one. So it's a really nasty shape. Got a little half steps. So that shape we could shift to the D string, and now you'd have D string on the 7th to the B string on the 11th fret. That's a nasty little flat 2 shape. And we can't really do it from the B string, but from the A string you could work that same shape from 12th on the A to the 15th fret on the G string. And then on the low E string we'd be back to kind of that shape again. So that might be another shape to kind of look at. So you can kind of take those little pieces and kind of work them. And you could work them from the other octaves too, actually. Like if we went to the D string on the 7th fret, we could work it as a below shape, kind of going from the D string to the low E string on the 6th fret for a flat 2. And we could kind of work that shape from our B string to kind of the D string on the 8th fret, or we could work that shape from the A note on the G string and work it to the A string on the 13th fret. So that would be kind of a nasty one. And then we could work it from the high E string to the 5th fret to, well, 17th fret to 15th fret, or from the high E5 to the G string on the 3rd fret. So that would be another nasty little flat 3 shape too. So you might want to think about just kind of isolating those shapes just to kind of be able to see flat 2s wherever you go. And then we could take that idea of kind of taking the half step and just kind of working that. And actually what can also be cool is to kind of, that randomly is, the scale we started with is the chromatic scale is all of those shapes of the flat 2 shapes. So what you could do to kind of practice playing chromatic scale, especially across strings, is you could make a rule where you always have to move by that distance. And randomly, this is going to be really nasty, but we could kind of set up a drone, actually, like on an E note could be kind of a cool thing. So let's see. I kind of set up an E drone or a drone here, so like lots of A notes, kind of with the loop pedal. And we could add in some more A's to that probably. Yeah, just to have like a big old nasty orchestra behind us, because this is always fun, right? And then we could kind of take a little drum beat maybe, and then we can play around with flat shapes. So you can basically kind of play around with that same idea with the other shapes. So for instance, we could do kind of a root to a 2 as an idea. So then we have like a whole step kind of idea. So on the low E string, I'm playing 5th fret to 7th fret for an A and a B note. But I'm thinking in my mind that's a 2 shape or a whole step shape. So you could kind of take that idea and you could try it from through the baseball octave. So you'd have low E on the 5th to 7. On the D string, you'd be going to the 9th fret on the D. It's kind of that 1-2 idea. On the high E, you'd have the 5 to 7 for the 1-2. On the G string, you'd have 2nd to 4th. On the low E, you'd have that 5-7 again. So you might want to try and run around the baseball octaves and just kind of see that whole step shape. And then from there, then we can go to the other octaves. We got the D string one to the B string 10 to B string 12, and then A string 12 to 14 on the A string, and then G string 14 to 16, and then we're back to the low E and back into the baseball octave at the top. So you might want to kind of play around with that. So that's kind of our same string shape, kind of for the A and the B, or the 1 and 2, or the whole step idea. Or we could look at it across a string by going low E to the A string on the 2nd fret. It's kind of that same 2 notes, different place. So we're playing A to B that way. Or you could take that idea from the D string to the G string on the 4. Or we could do that idea from the B string 10 to the high E7. Or we could do that idea from the A string on the 12 to the D string on the 9. Or we could take that idea and kind of go from the G string on the 14 to the B string 12. So that's where our shape is slightly different by 1 fret. And then from there we could go to the low E on the 17 to the A string on the 14. It's kind of we're back into kind of our octave shape again. So that might be kind of a cool thing to kind of isolate those shapes of kind of how far it is to a second on the guitar. Or we could do that over the octave, so we could work it from the low E string to the D string on the 9, kind of seeing it from the D string octave. That's kind of a 9. Or we could do that idea from the D string to the B string 12. string second to the high seventh fret. That's ridiculously crazy. Or we could do it from the A string on the 12 to the G string on the 16. Or we could do it from the G string on the 14 to the 19th fret on the high E. So maybe that's not so bad. So kind of drilling those particular shapes of A. Now you could also see it from below, actually, kind of working the D string on the 7 to the low E 7th fret would be a 9-2, kind of working it from that low E octave. So root the 2 that way. Or you could do it from the high E string on the 5th to the G on the 4. Or you could do it from the B string to the D string, or on the B string 10 to the D string 9. Or you could work it from the G string on the 12th fret to the A string on the 14th fret, sorry, 14th fret to the 14th fret on the A. You kind of see that shape that way. So kind of working A root 2 shapes kind of the other way. So that might be something else you want to kind of play around with. And if we made a rule, actually maybe we should set up another jam. So if we're doing maybe a different beat this time. And we can bring our A drone back. And now we can kind of work our A's, and then we can just start with just kind of jamming all of the 2s. So just that. fret. So then you can take kind of the distance from the low E on the 5th fret to the 8th fret on the low E string. Now all of a sudden things start sounding sad. So we got kind of 5th fret on the low E to 8th fret on the low E. And we can kind of take that idea and then try it through our octave shape. So 1 flat 3, 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 kind of through the octave shapes. Or we could kind of look at it across strings, and then you have low E on the 5th fret to the A string on the 3rd fret, kind of for that A to C note is that what we're kind of playing around with. And then from the D string, you'd have 7 on the D to 5th on the G string. It's kind of a little flat 3 shape. And then on the B string, you could work that same shape actually from the B10 to the high E on the A. And then on the A string, we have that same shape from 12 on the A string to the D on the 10. And then from there, our next flat 3 shape, this is where things are different, is on the G 14th fret to the B string 13th fret. It's kind of another flat 3 shape. And then from there, we go low E on the 17th to the A string on the 15th, and we kind of be back into kind of our regular shapes. Now another way to look at it is kind of as the lower shapes. Like if you worked the D string on the 7th fret, you could look at the 3rd on the low E string on the 8th fret and kind of work it that way. It's kind of an A note to a flat 3rd shape. And then from there, if we went to the high E, you could kind of see it to the G string on the 5th fret. So we got the high E5 to G string 5 for our flat 3rd shape. On the G string, you could kind of work it from there to the A string on the 3rd fret. It's kind of your root flat 3 shape. And then low E, we can't really do it below, but the B string, we could kind of work into the D on the 10th fret. And then from the G string, we could kind of work it to the A on the 15th. We already kind of talked about that shape. So kind of working that flat 3rd shape could be kind of a cool thing too. So we got kind of the above idea, and then we got our below idea, kind of working it from that root to flat 3 that way. Or another one you might want to play around with is doing the D string on the 7th fret to the A string on the 3rd fret. It's kind of another flat 3rd shape. And that shape actually you could do from the G string or B string on the 10 to the G string 5th fret. Or you could do it from the A string on the 12 to the low E on the A. Or you could do it from the G string on the 14 to the D string on the 10th. Or you could do it from the high E on the 15th fret to the B string on the 13th fret. So you might want to kind of play around with that too, kind of working that flat 3 shape that way. So we got a lot of different flat 3 shapes we could play around with too, and we could set up another jam, a little jazz something for the flat 3rd. So what we could do is kind of work that same kind of idea. We could drill kind of our same string kind of idea, or we could work our next string up kind of idea, kind of drilling those shapes in the flat 3rd. So you could kind of take all those shapes and then kind of play around with those, kind of bring the flat 3. And then from there, then we might even want to make a rule where we only have to move 5 flat 3 shapes. And actually, if we do that, we end up with something called a fully diminished 7 arpeggio, where we'd be playing the root and a flat 3, and then a flat 5, and then a 6, and then we'd have a root and a flat 3, and then we have a flat 5, and then a 6, and then we have a root, and then a flat 3, and then a flat 5, and then a 6. So you might want to kind of play around with that too, kind of working the flat 3 shape that way. So that could be kind of a cool thing to just make a rule for yourself that you always have to move by flat 3 shape. The whole tone scale too. If you find a shape that you really like the sound of in that particular scale, if you move it by a flat 3, it's still part of that arpeggio. So that can be kind of a cool thing to play around with shape-wise too. Taking little shapes that you kind of find put our drone on. But then another shape, or we could take the next shape, which would be the major third shape. So kind of a root on the low E string A note to a ninth fret on the low E string, kind of for our C sharp note. So these are all one fret higher than all the ones we were just looking at. Now we got root to three, 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 root to three. So we got low E string on the fifth to low E on the nine, or we could go D string on the seventh to the D string on the 11th fret, or we could go high E on the fifth to the ninth fret on the high E, or we could go G string on the second to the sixth fret on the G. So you're kind of thinking of that shape of kind of that major third shape. And if you know the flat threes really well, they're just one fret higher. So kind of working chromatic scale with the shapes here. So that might be kind of another kind of cool thing to kind of see. And then our shape above actually is kind of changed too. So now we got low E on the fifth fret to the A string on the fourth fret is kind of that A and C sharp note. On the D string, you'd have that same shape now from the D string 7 to the G string 6th fret. And then from the G string, now we'd have G string second to the B string on the second. It's kind of our shape across. So that's the one that's a little bit different, is that G string second to the B string second for the A C sharp note. And then from the B string, we'd have B string 10 to high E on the 9. From the A string, you'd have the A string 12 to the D string on the 11th fret. On the G string, you'd have the 14th to the 14th, which is like the second and second. And then you have the low E fifth to the A string on the 4th. Or, sorry, 17 to 16. Kind of thinking 5 and 4, kind of same shape there. And then from the high E string, actually, well, we could work below shape. So you'd have the D string on the 7 to the low E on the 9. And then you could kind of work that D string on the 7 to the A string on the 4 is kind of another below shape. And then from the B string, we could work the shape to the D string on the 11th fret. Or we could work the B string on the 10 to the G string on the 6th, so it's kind of a below shape. And then from there, we could, let's see, from the A string, you'd have the low E string on the 9. So A12 to low E 9 is kind of the A to C sharp. On the G string, you'd have that to the D string. On the high E, you'd have that to the B string on the 14. So there's some really cool like little below shapes for the thirds. Kind of working that through it too. So you might want to kind of play around with that all the way through too. So kind of drilling just major third shapes. So we could set up another jam with major thirds. So let's see. We'll get our drone on and oh, that's kind of a cool little Latin something. So now we can work just major thirds as kind of a shape across, and then kind of just drill those shapes. Augmented triad arpeggio, where we have the root to the third, and then the third we go to something called the sharp 5, which is a little nasty, or the flat 6, actually is another name for that. And then we have kind of back to our root. So you could practice the shapes and drill them by just taking one shape and then always moving by that shape. then we can take our next shape, which is the root to 4 shape. So now we're kind of working the low E string on the 5th fret to the A string on the 4th fret. And then from there, we can kind of work that through our baseball octaves. So we can go D string on the 7 to the G string on the 7. So it's kind of the distance straight across the string is normally a 4th. However, when we get to the G string one, that shape's going to change to the B string on the 3rd. So you have 2nd on the G for the root, and then 3rd on the B string for the 4th. Same shape up from the G string on the 14. So we can kind of take that shape and then try and drill that shape through baseball octaves. And then from there, then we might want to look at some other 4th shapes actually, where we could do kind of a below. And if you're on the D string on the 7th fret, you can do the 4th on the A string on the 5th fret. So you can kind of work it root to 4 that way. And that shape you could use from the high E on the 5th to the B string on the 3rd fret. From the B string, you'd be going to the G string on the 7th fret. On the A string, you'd be working the low E string on the 10th fret. And if you're looking at that going, man, that's a power chord shape, it is, but we're instead of thinking of root as root 5, we're thinking of it as root 4, kind of upside down. It's kind of weird. So then you got the G string on the 14 to the D string on the 12th fret, would kind of be a root 4, and then the high E on the 17 to the B string on the 15 is a root 4. So we could kind of work it that way too. So kind of that distance straight across the string, or from if we kind of work out the other way, we're kind of thinking of kind of a power chord shape. Another 4, but let's see, is if we're on the D, we could do a 4 by going to the low E string on the 10. So you got 7th fret on the D, the low E on the 10th fret would kind of be an A to a D note that way. And that shape, if we went to the G string, you'd have G on the 2nd to the A string on the 5th. The high E, you could kind of work it to the G string on the 7th fret for kind of that root 4. So we could kind of play around with that as kind of an idea too, and we could set up another jam for 4th shapes. Oh, that's an interesting groove for this. Let's see. About that with all these other ones, we've been like, well, we could try just drilling the shapes by just moving by nothing but the shape. Now the weird thing about a 4th shape that way is you end up going through a chromatic scale in a very strange order. And if we were thinking the A is the root all the way through, you'd have the root, and then you'd have the 4, and then a flat 7, and then a flat 3, and if we move by another 4th shape, we got a flat 6, another 4th is a flat 2, another 4th is a flat 5, another 4th is a 7, another 4th is a 3rd, another 4th is the 6th, another 4th is the 2nd, and then we got the 5, and then, or sorry, 2, and then we'd be going to the 5, and it would be back to 1. So it's this weird, strange chromatic order. But if you wanted to do that, you just make a rule, I'm always going to move by 4th. for a lot of it actually it's kind of fourth straight across. Whereas so it's like quartal harmony, I guess, or so you got kind of the it's almost like 5 5 5 5 6 6 actually straight across. I don't know, it might be something interesting to play around with. I really like using those shapes in a lot of situations for different things. They can be very, very cool punctuations. Sounds very West Montgomery in a way. And now then we could take our next shape, which is the tritone, or the devil's interval, the most evilest sounding craziness of all time, and it's also in every blues chord known to man, or almost every blues chord. So now we're going to be going the distance from the low E string on the 5th to the A string on the 6th fret, so this is really kind of nasty. And it kind of splits the octave. We're right in the center of the octave this way. So we can kind of take that shape and try it. So from the D string, we have the G string on the 8th fret. On the G string, we'd have the 2nd fret on the G for the A. And your tritone is going to be on the B string on the 4. So that's the one place where the shape is really different. And then you're kind of back to that diagonal shape from the low E. And then D string, same thing. B string on the 10 to the high E on the 11. And then we'd have the A string on the 12 to the D string on the 13th fret. And then we have the G string on the 14 to the B string on the 16th. And then kind of bringing that back. So this is really kind of a nasty shape. It's kind of that root flat 5. But if we kind of set up our jam for that. Little nasty pop here. Now there is another shape kind of across the strings. Like if you went to the low E string and the D string on the 1st fret, that was going to be another place you could try there. So the D string, then you go into the B string on the 4. So 7 on the D and then B string 4. Got to try there tritone, or the flat 5, then we could work that to the 5th and kind of work that. And this is probably one of the more common shapes, actually. A lot of times in rock, dealing with power chords, they sound really powerful. So you could kind of work low E on the 5th to the A string 7th fret. And then if we go to first bass at the D string, we could work that 7th fret on the D to the 9th fret on the G string is kind of a 5th. And actually, if we went to the G string on the 2nd, then that's where things kind of change, because then we have B string on the 5th, kind of, so you're skipping over 2 frets, so that's one spot that the shape changes. But then from the B string on the 10, we'd have the high E on the 12. From the A string on the 12, we'd have the D string on the 14. And then we'd be back to the G on the 14, which is like 2nd fret, kind of to that B string on the 17th fret. And then we'd have a low E string on the 17 to the 19 on the A string. So you can kind of work those power chord shapes. Kind of work the root 5, root 5, root 5, root 5, root 5 is kind of an idea. Another 5th you could look at is you could look at the below one, where you've got the D string on the 7th fret to the A string on the 7th fret. So wherever note you're on, almost always right below it is kind of a 5th shape too, root 5. That kind of happens a lot in bass lines especially. So you can take that from the B string on the 10 to the G string on the 9, or you can take it on the high E and work it to the B string on the 5, so 5th on those. Or you can work the G string on the 2nd to the D string on the 2nd. Or you can work the A string on the 12 to the low E string on the 12. The one weird spot is that B string shift where we got the 10th on the B for the 9 on the G, and then you'd have the G string on the 14 to the 14 on the D. So you can kind of work those too. So these look a lot like fourth shapes because the root to the 5, like low E on the 5th to the 7 on the A, that root 5th. From there to the D string on the 7th is kind of your fourth shape. So a fourth is a 5th upside down in a way. Like you could go root 5, but if the 5th was the root, then your root would be the 4th. But anyway, so we could work a jam with that. And so we could kind of dial up another drum beat. Let's see what we got here. Oh yeah. Latin fusion thing with that, so then we can work fifth. And another fifth you may want to look at is kind of that low string to the D string, the second fret, kind of over the string fifth. And that one we're trying to work from the D string on the 7 to the D string fifth. Or you can work the A string on the 12 to the G string on the 9. Say with this. However, actually, we were talking about how you could kind of work the, or how we could kind of put things together into scales, and fifths are kind of like fourths that way, actually. So if you were going to work just fifth to fifth to fifth to fifth, you'd end up with a chromatic scale in a really weird, cool way, where you'd play the root, and then the fifth, and then a 2, and then you'd end up with a 6, and then from the 6, if we go to a fifth, we kind of end up on the B string on the 14. Fifth from the third would be the 7. A fifth from the 7 would be the flat 5. A flat 5 fifth would kind of give us the flat 2. The flat 2 shape going to fifth would get us to flat 6. And then a fifth from the flat 6 would get us to flat 3, and then the flat 3 shape and a fifth would get us to the flat 7, and the flat 7 to a fifth would get us to the 4th, a 4th with the 5, and then from the 4 then we'd be going back to our root. So it'd be this really weird, cool, like root 5, 2, 6, and then from there we got the 3rd, and then the 7, and then the flat 5, and then flat 2, and then the flat 6, and then from the flat 6, then we end up with a flat 3, and then from the flat 3, then we end up with the flat 7, and then we end up with that 4, and then we're back to the root, kind of working the top. So it's this weird, crazy chromatic thing. We could try that. Something else you might want to kind of play around with. And then from the 5, then we'd be going into our flat 6. And a lot of our shapes actually pass the tritone, or like the 5th, they start looking like each other. So if we're dealing with flat 6 shapes, the 6 shapes end up almost kind of looking like 3rd shapes, but from the other way around. And that's something called interval inversion. But we could kind of start out with even kind of a same string flat 6. Actually, your low E string on the 5th going down to 1st fret would be a flat 6. And we could even kind of take that shape and then work it through our baseball octaves. At least that far. And then from there, then we could go to the B on the 10 to the flat 6 on the B string 6th fret. And then you could take the A string on the 12 and kind of work it down to the A string on the 8. And then the G string would kind of work in the 14th fret to the 10th fret on the G. And then you'd have the high E kind of working down from the 5th fret on the high E to the 17th fret to the 13th fret. And then we're kind of back in our baseball octave after that. Or another flat 6 shape we could work is kind of across the string, kind of one past where the 5th was, would be a root to a flat 6. So we could take the D string and work that shape. And then from the G string, actually, that's where that would get a little weird, because you have the 2nd on the G string to the 6th fret on the B string is kind of a flat 6. So we could kind of work that idea. Flat 6, kind of working the A string 12 to the D string 15. So you could kind of play around with that one. And as far as below flat 6s go, from the D string on the 7, you could go to the A string on the 8th fret, and it kind of looks like a 3rd upside down, but now you're thinking root to flat 6. So root to flat 6, or root to flat 6, kind of looking at that part of the shape. Or you could do the B string on the 10, and this is where it's different, is the G string on the 10 is kind of your flat 6. Or from the A string on the 12, you'd have the low E string on the 11. Or from the G string on the 14, you'd have the D string on the 15. So you may want to kind of play around with that shape too. And another flat 6 we may want to play around with is if we do the root on the low E string on the 5th, another flat 6 would be going to the D string on the flat, or on the 3rd fret. So you may want to kind of play around with that flat 6 too. So you could go from the D string 7, and then your flat 6 is going to be on the B string on the 6th, or 6th fret. So root flat 6. Or we can kind of take the A string on the 10, and then your flat 6 is going to be kind of working right below it. Actually, that's that root part where the shapes change. Or you got root, flat 6. So we can kind of dial in and jam with flat 6s. I might just kind of cool things with flat 6. And we can kind of get it thrown off. Play around with flat 6s, and then if we took our next shape, then we kind of be working the root to the 6 instead. So now we have a major 6, so it sounds a little bit brighter. So you could kind of work that as the same string shape, kind of working the low E on the 5th to the low E on the 2nd fret. So kind of skipping 2 frets. So now our shapes look like flat 3rds, but backwards. So we have root on the low E string 5th, and then flat 3 on the low E string 2nd. And we can kind of take that shape and kind of work it through our baseball octaves. I can't go about that far. So root 6, root 6, root 6. Or we could take the B string and kind of work that from the 10 on the B to the 7 on the B. Or we could take the A string on the 12 and work it to the A string 9. Or we could work the G string on the 14 to the G string on the 11. So that might be kind of a cool thing to kind of see that shape too. And then some other 6 shapes we could work it as kind of a below idea. If we had a root on the D string on the 7, your 6 is going to be on the A string on the 9. So you want to kind of think about the kind of that below shape. And it looks like flat third shapes that we kind of talked about earlier. But now you're thinking root 6, root 6, root 6, root 6, root 6, and that's the one place where it changes that B on the 10 to the G string on the 11. For kind of root 6, 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 root 6. Or you could kind of work at let's see what else we could do. Kind of have that, and then you could go kind of across the strings too, kind of working low E on the 5th to the A string on the 7 or 9. So you can kind of work that from the D string 7 to the G string 11, or you could work that from the B string on the 10 to the high E on the 14, or you could work it on the G on the 2nd fret to the 7th fret on the B string. That's quite a stretch there. But that might be kind of a cool thing to do to kind of see all those 6 shapes kind of working. And then we can dial in a jam with that and kind of say some things with 6. We go. Now, if we kind of did that same idea though with the 6s that we did kind of with our flat 3s too, if we just moved by nothing but flat 6 shapes, or by 6 shapes. And we kind of end up with that same scenario actually that we kind of had with our diminished chord. It's just how it's gotten rearranged. Play around with that idea too. That might be kind of something cool to play around with. And then from 6 shapes, then we'd be going into our 7th shapes, or flat 7 shapes. And so from the low E string, if you kind of go down 2 frets to the 3rd fret on the low E string, then now we give you a flat 7 shape. So we'd have a root to flat 7, kind of skipping over 1 fret. So it's kind of like the 2nd shapes we were looking at, actually the whole step shapes. So we'd have like root to flat 7, D string on the 7 to the D string 5th. We'd have high on the 5th to the high E 3rd. So you could kind of work that same string kind of idea through the 2nd on the G to open G. So you could kind of work that, kind of working the A and the G notes kind of through the baseball octaves that way. And then if we were looking for other shapes for flat 7s, if we kind of worked it off the octave shape, we could kind of look at kind of a flat 7 shape almost across the string. We got low E on the 5th to the D string on the 5th fret. So we could kind of take that shape and then play around with it. So in the D string, you'd have 7th fret on the D, to the B string on the 8 would be your flat 7th. So that's how the B string kind of shifts things. And then from the G string, if we had the G string on the 2nd fret, you'd have high E on the 3rd fret. It's kind of that same shape. And then if we took the A string on the 12, we'd have that same shape to the G on the 12. And then from the G on the 14, you'd have that same shape with a high E15. And then low E string on the 17th fret, the 17 on the D string would be a flat 7. So that might be kind of a cool thing to kind of try the flat 7 shapes that way. Let's see, another flat 7, I guess if you're really adventurous, you can kind of work it across on the next string, like low E on the 5th to the A string on the 10th fret would kind of be one. So now I'm just skipping over 1, 2, 3 frets. So you may want to work that from the D string, you work it from the B string, work it from the G string, and you're kind of working that root. Oh my gosh, that'd be ridiculous to that 8th fret on the B. So you may want to kind of play around with that flat 7 shape too. And then below shapes would be kind of cool too, like on the D string, if you wanted to get to a flat 7, you could go to the A on the 10. So you may want to kind of isolate that shape too. So high E 5th to the B string 8th fret, and then G string 2nd fret to the D string 5th. Or we could go to the B string on the 10 to the G string on the 12 is kind of a flat 7 shape. Or A string 12 to low E on the 15. Or a G string on the 14 to the D on the 17. And randomly, if we were going to kind of put those flat 7 shapes together, let's see, we'd have root, a flat 7, flat 7 would go a flat 7 to, let's see, a flat 6. Flat 6 would go, let's see, yeah, flat 6, flat 7 from a flat 6 is going to be a flat 5, and then a flat 5, flat 7 shape is going to take us to a third, and then the third flat 7 shape is going to take us to a 2, and then a 2 flat 7 shape is going to take us back to the root. So we actually end up with that whole tone scale that we were doing, but in kind of a weird, strange flat 7 order. So that might be kind of an interesting thing too. Actually, a lot of that stuff we talked about at the beginning is kind of coming back here at the end. So we could kind of work a flat 7 jam. And let's see, what if we did yeah, maybe this faster is awesome. Yeah. Yeah. So we may want to kind of play around with kind of those flat 7 shapes just by themselves. Or we can kind of put that together into that whole tone scale, or even kind of put that idea together. Shapes and kind of put them together into the scale too. That could be cool. Play around with that flat 2 shape and then kind of, or flat 7 shape and then kind of work around with that, like moving through the whole tone. It's kind of like a combination of it. So that might be another option there. And then we've got one other shape actually to kind of cover, and then we're back to the octave. I know this is crazy long lesson, survey lesson over things you can do with shapes, but then that way we can kind of come back in, and I'm hoping to kind of go, okay, let's play around with these shapes and then have a jam over it. And then, hey, let's play with these shapes and then have a jam over it. So anyway, so we've got one more shape. We've got our root to our 7 or a major 7. So it's a half step below. So rather than the flat 2 shape we started with, now we have kind of that shape in reverse to get to our root to our 7. So we can work that through our baseball octaves, just kind of going 1 fret below all our notes of baseball octaves. So kind of just a half step below. Or we could work some other shapes. We could work kind of a shape to the next string. This would be ridiculous, actually. It's Louis on the 5th to the A string on the 11, which could be an interesting shape to try and work and kind of move around. Or you could work it from the Louis string on the 5th to the D string on the 6th fret, and that could be kind of a very cool shape to kind of work too. So you have D on the 7 to the B string on the 9, or A string on the 12 to the G string on the 13, or you'd have the G string on the 2nd fret to the high on the 4th fret would be a major 7. So root 7, root 7, root 7, root 7. Let's see, root 7, and then we could have kind of everything kind of coming back over the top. So if you were going to move by 7 shapes, actually, this could be kind of weird too. Is you would end up with a chromatic scale, just like we started with the half step shapes, but in reversed order. So they'd be in the order of root 7, flat 7, 6, flat 6, 5, flat 5, 4, 3, flat 3, 2, flat 2, 1. So that would be kind of a weird thing. But if you're moving by that shape, root to 7, root to 7, right, and then root to 7. Let's see, root to 7. Oh yeah, root 7. Oh, that's a nasty shape. Gotta love that. Let's see, and then root to 7, and then root to 7, and then root to, oh, I gotta go to another one, root to 7, root to 7. Oh, that's nasty. Yeah. So root to 7, 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 root to 7. So that could be really nasty, actually. Very cool to kind of work chromatic scale, but in that order of kind of working the 7 shapes. It's nasty. Oh my gosh, that's great. And then let's see, so kind of a root 7 and a flat 7 all together. You know, if you start building chords out of it, it gets really nasty. Yeah, the wave of the future. But we could work a jam off of that if we wanted to, and we could start with just the major 7 shapes. We get another beat on. much play anything you want to. I kind of like working with drone notes. Sometimes just that one long A. So that's the basics of how you can kind of take little pieces of those shapes and kind of drill them so that things are underneath your fingers and you have an idea of how far you have to go. So for instance, one really practical and easy application of this is we could take a couple shapes that make chords and then put those together. So for instance, just as kind of a cap at the end here. So for instance, if we kind of took the root and what we're thinking of is the third and then the fifth shape that we're doing, and we're going to put just those three shapes together, that's actually what makes your A major chord. And there's a lot of really cool placement. You may have heard of the Ed Cage way that chords kind of move across the guitar, because if you put those three shapes together, the three and then the five, those are the three notes that make a major chord. For A, we're playing A's, C sharps, and E's, and then more A's and C sharps and E's. Really practical application of learning all these shapes so that you have all these sounds right under the fingers and you can just pull them out and your ear and everything's kind of connected. It is working them through chords. One really easy example would be like an A major chord. And anytime you've got an A note, you're always going a third away for a major chord, and then you're adding the fifth to the chord. So for an A, we're playing A and C sharp and E. And then we could take the next note, the next A, and then do root and 3 and 5. And then we could take the next root and do root and 3 and 5. And then we could take the next root and root and 3 and 5. And then 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 root. So as long as we're kind of going from those three shapes, then those are the notes that we need for a major chord. If you're looking at big pieces of that, you may have just the A major and root position randomly. The next shape up would be if you took your first finger and kind of put them across the second fret and thought of a G major shape. Those are more roots and thirds and fifths, more A and C sharp and E notes for A. And then if you go to the fifth fret, you could kind of do an E major shape, right? Kind of bar A major on the fifth fret. And then from there, actually, we end up with kind of a little D major shape, actually, that kind of works on 9th and 10th fret, sort of. I'm kind of putting my first fret over, first finger over, kind of that other fifth and root there. And then from there, if you kind of bar on 9th fret, you can kind of think of a C major chord shape, and kind of have like a little C way up the neck. And then from there, you'd be starting over here with kind of your A major shaping it. So it's almost as if you'd have an A major in root position. If you capoed 2nd fret, that would make a G chord shape for A. If you capoed on 5th fret, it'd be like having an E major shape for A. If you capoed on 7th fret, it would be like having a D major chord shape for A. And if you capoed on 9th fret, it'd be like having a C shape for A. And then from there, it'd be like having another A major from 12th fret if you capoed on 12th fret, if you could even possibly capo on 12th fret. So you can kind of think about those notes in big pieces, and we can kind of work jams over that too. And you could just break up little pieces, or you could put little pieces of that together into two chords. application would be kind of taking that idea of the root 3/5 and making it a root flat 3/5, so that you would have kind of a minor chord idea. So we can kind of look for roots in flat 3s and 5s shape-wise, and kind of work those across the guitar and create little A minor shapes. And you'll see a couple common shapes. Actually, all these kind of relate to our caged way of moving too, like the A shape. Actually, just like the A major went to G major, A minor goes to a G minor shape, but a G minor shape is very strange. At least on the back side. So this is pretty strange. This little G minor. It's like you took a G major and then kind of flattened it. And then you got the E bar, that's a very common one, actually probably more familiar there. Then from there you'd have a D minor shape, kind of working as a D string. And then you have a C minor shape, but one that probably nobody ever plays. It's kind of that D minor on the back side. And then you'd be back to your A minor shape. So we can work an A minor jam if we wanted to too. They're more of kind of a A minor movement. That's kind of my introduction to Munson Jam Tracks, kind of going over a little piece of all the intervals, and then we're going to spend lots of time jamming and have some fun, like looking at interval shapes, and then we can kind of relate those to every chord and every scale known to man. If you know those scale shapes, you can make anything you want happen straight from your head as a musical idea, straight to the fingers on the instrument. So anyway, that's the beginning of Jam Tracks. So good luck!